This is the No Strings Podcast with Rel Simon. What's up, y'all? This is the No Strings Podcast, episode 53. Your boy is back once again with another episode. And I've been dropping them back to back since Toronto. And you ain't even eat yet. Previous episode 52 was Vehicle Epidemic. I'm starting to add that to my jargon and my dictionary, Vehicle Epidemic, as I comment on these different boards and platforms. And now we're on episode 53, something that I alluded to at multiple points in the last episode, debt loop. So this is episode 53 and the title being Debt Loop. And I'm going to get started. And as always, this podcast is available on all platforms. Thank you for wherever you're listening to this particular podcast, whether it be on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Google Podcasts. Which I think Google Podcast shut down. Is it all integrated into YouTube now? But whether if you just saw the TikTok promo video or the Instagram post or whatever, just thank you for your kindness, your attention. And again, I'm here to help provide just some opinions. Disclaimer, I'm not a professional financial advisor, but I just want to provide some opinions and advice so that we can all get our financial lives in order. And of course, this being brought to you in part by Spotify for podcasters. So, debt loop, formalities out of the way in debt loop, let's get right into it. And so I'm going to start by asking and defining the question of what is an infinite loop. So I went to Wikipedia, and this is what Wikipedia told me. In computer programming, an infinite loop is a sequence of instructions that, as written, will continue endlessly unless an external intervention occurs, such as turning off power via a switch or pulling a plug. And this may be intentional. And so let me ask another question right now. How are you doing right now? Are you currently broke? Or do you feel like you're broke? Are you currently relying on debt to survive? While these mortgages and these student loans, that's the type of debt that can surmount and be hurdles and obstacles. Those appear to be the sort of ball and chain that ties us down for years. Unless you so happen to upgrade to a newer house and get mortgage after mortgage or student loans, you keep going back to school and deferring your loans, right? But it does, to me, those two are like the ball and chain. For a majority of this episode, notwithstanding, I will hop back into the different avenues, but it's the credit cards to me that can keep us in that cycle, a quote unquote debt loop as I'm defining it. I get a lot of my data from Wikipedia, Google, Bankrate, YouTube, and particular channels within YouTube. And so CNBC released a YouTube video on August 5th titled, quote, why monthly home payments are skyrocketing right now, end quote. And they noted out a statistic that 82% of home buyers said they regret their home purchase, with 44% saying they've had to take on additional debt to maintain their standard of living. This to me just sort of reads that too many Americans are house poor. You have that honeymoon of finally getting the keys to the house, finishing the closing costs. You start buying the furniture. 3, 5, 7, 8, 12 months in, you have that honeymoon of living in your home And that honeymoon may kind of wear off after a few months. For everyone, it's different. Your mileage may vary. But there's the sentiment of becoming house poor. And a lot of us, we overestimate what we can afford. And you fall into a sort of debt loop where you're having to pay for your home or your other expenses on credit. You may be, all of your earned income for the month may be tied into the mortgage. And so you don't have enough money. And so you end up hopefully getting a side hustle. And maybe even then that's not enough. And so you take on a few credit cards to pay for the groceries this week, that week. And you may end up at the end of the month with a little bit of a balance, and you rinse and repeat, and you have that seminal attachment to credit. I kind of feel that way, or I've been feeling that way recently. Let me jump into reading some stats from bankrate.com from their 2024 credit card debt report. They say that 44% of credit card holders say they carry card balances from month to month, according to Bankrate's closing rewards in debt survey. 36% of U.S. adults have more credit card debt than emergency savings. 47% of U.S. adults say money negatively affects their mental health, at least occasionally. 47% of U.S. adults who say money negatively affects their mental health, at least occasionally, cite being in debt as a reason why, according to Bankrate's latest money and mental health survey. 38% of U.S. adults are willing to go into debt for discretionary purchases this year, according to Bankrate's discretionary spending survey. And finally, 67% of Americans with credit card debt still make an effort to maximize credit card rewards, according to Bankrate's Chasing Rewards in Debt survey. Now, let's go into and break each one down really quickly. For me, that first point, 44% of credit card holders say they carry balances from month to month. I fall in that camp as a technicality. I do use my cards often, and sometimes there's a small balance, if any at all, near the end of the statement cycle. Some people do churn their credit for the rewards, and others make or budget their money well just to survive. Right now, my play is definitely a little bit of a hybrid mix of using my cards and paying them off to gain the rewards points for travel. But also at the same time, I personally have to be cautious that I don't fall back into a pit, that deeper loop, that $24,000 that I was in 7 years ago that you all know of if you listen to the pod or ever hear me speak. But I do use my credit cards as if they're a debit card. And there's that sort of mental reliance of credit being an extension, knowing it could be a holdover for this or the next time I get paid. Not that I'm particularly in dire straits. I'm in a sort of that lower tier of being in financial dire straits. And there are things I can definitely clean up. So I do qualify into a little mini loop, I guess. Going back, the second point, again, 36% of U.S. adults have more credit card debt than emergency savings. This to me is alarming because having more debt than emergency savings will keep you in the loop. You will stay in that loop because you'll end up bypassing your savings just to pay debt down. Or your emergency fund, you may have an emergency fund and it may not be strong enough to absorb the blow of when something unfortunate occurs. And so that's where that budgeting really comes in. If you have an emergency, you have an emergency. For a lot of people, credit cards should just be the last resort. The debt is a double-edged sword. Some of it is good, a lot of it is very bad. But It's going down to the basic fundamentals. And you're surveying a lot of Americans who may have some general knowledge about finances, but it's one thing if you read it. It's another thing if you actually do it and put these good habits and put good habits into practice. The third point, remember 47% of U.S. adults say money negatively affects their mental health, at least occasionally. And being in debt can be stressful. I was stressed a lot of times. Just remember that it can trap you. It forces you to run like a hamster on a wheel. You feel burdened, this big weight. You feel like, what's that in the Wizard of Oz? Which one of the witches was under the house? Imagine you being a witch under the house. Then the house is dead. From work, health, relationships, life is already stressful enough, right? Eating wise, your spouse, maybe you may be having some troubles at work. And each avenue of those 3 points I made are completely different, and you have to be able to manage and balance. But just like your money, you have to make it a tool and utilize it and think of it as a tool for freedom, not a blanket for stress, not a blanket that will be weighing you down. That fourth point they mentioned, 38% of U.S. adults are willing to go into debt for discretionary purchases this year. That means that 38% of adults are willing to pay for clothes and vacations on credit. I'd fall in this camp again, and granted, I am saving for retirement. I do have a well-cushioned emergency fund. For me this year, there's a temptation to buy shoes because I have a lot of hats. I've bought a lot of hats and I need shoes to go with the hats. I spent, I don't have the figure in front of me. I just checked it the other day. Spent a lot on Amazon this year. I remember doing a podcast a while ago. It was like, okay, I can just spend $500 on Amazon this year, including Amazon Prime. And not only did I fail that in spades. I'll tell you that much. And again, I've been in this small debt loop this year because I've had to fund a lot of things for Ghana on credit, Toronto, and just making purchases on credit. I just bought some new dress shirts the other day, and making those purchases with a majority of my purchases. Even when I go to the grocery store, a lot of purchases are on credit instead of debit. Right. And then once I get my balance, I have enough money in the checking account to say, oh, okay, cool, I can cover this. But again, it's hard because I have to be self-aware and be humble myself on this episode that I am in a debt loop. But at the same time, overall, I'm just like I'm debt free. There is no revolving debt on me. And again, remember that last point, 67% of Americans with credit card debt will still make an effort to maximize their rewards. And so you have to think or ask yourself, are you using credit cards with reckless abandon, or are you using it as a strategic play like the 67% of Americans that were surveyed? For some, you have these rewards that outweigh the risk. You work to gather enough reward points to travel or make a big purchase. Depending on the card issuer, points expire, benefits expire, or lapse. If you do have credit cards, make sure to transfer over those points to the affiliated hotel and airline partners. And make sure you pay off your credit cards before the next monthly cycle. I got a lot of points. I need to go ahead and transfer this big bag of points over to Air France because I still have a goal of going to Paris next year. So again, just to really wrap up the first half of this pod, there's a lot of people in a debt loop. I'm in a little mini debt loop. A lot of people are in a larger debt loop. I think of it as like a roller coaster as well. I don't like roller coasters. I don't like being spun around. My vertigo is bad and it'll really just fuck up the rest of my day. Some people like roller coasters. Some people will be in the debt loop forever and just ride the roller coasters. Some people hop on and hop off. I was on for a while, got spinny, got dizzy, and I had to get out of the debt loop. And now I'm real strategic with mine. But that's what I'm telling you. Don't be spinning those circles, especially not in the debt loop. I don't know, relationship loop. Are things stagnant? You may be in a relationship loop. You may be in a weight loss loop where you're trying to bulk and gain muscle or lose weight, and you feel like you're stagnant. You may be in a loop at work, or you may be in a mental headspace loop with your own mental health. So, all right, y'all, first half of this one is in the books. I got a whole lot to talk about different stuff. We talking about Reddit. I got a little thing about a reference to TLC on this thing, like the group TLC. We talking about Reddit. We talking about numbers. We talking about the Fed, who the Fed is, what is the Fed. We're going to get into all of that in the next part right after the intermission. So y'all know how I do. I will catch you on the other side. Welcome back. Hanging Out, No Strings Podcast, episode 53, titled Debt Loop. Now, let's transition to talk about, quote unquote, the Fed. The Federal Reserve, or the Fed for short, serves as the central bank of the United States. It's responsible for setting interest rates, regulating the financial market, managing the money supply of the United States of America. One of the most powerful financial institutions in its entire world, right? And there's this thing about inflation that's been hitting us for the last 3 years, maybe even longer if you want to imagine that. Maybe pre-COVID, if you want to imagine that. For some pre-COVID, probably post-COVID. But just in terms of a general educational tip in terms of interest rates, the Fed, for the most part, controls interest rates on a variety of things, consumer products, home loans, things like that, especially where there's some type of debt or substantial point of debt involved, cost of goods and services, where an interest rate is involved. I would not necessarily say for credit cards and banks, right? Like a Macy's credit card or which is a Macy's credit card. It's underneath a bank. A particular bank would own a Macy's credit card. Macy's just has the brand name on that bank. But you think about Capital One or Discover or whatever, right? And then you think about those rates or those APR rates. Those are just different rates: 22%, 25%, 29%. Best Buy credit card. But when the Fed raises the interest rates on these sort of general products, let's just simplify it to just like mortgages, right? When they raise the interest rate, that sends a message to us Americans to curb spending and borrowing because everything costs so much. It costs so much for its initial price, right? In terms of the principal. Then you add on the interest. And for example, a 7% interest rate on a mortgage for a home is considered high. And this will repel prospective buyers from trying to purchase a home at that time. That can help curb the home market, just stop people from trying to buy a new home. Because why would you buy a home at 7% when in the past, in the interest rates, they ebb and flow, they change year over year. You could probably find something at 3.5%, 4%, 5%. You think about student loans, a lot of student loans really are at the very most 10%, but not even that, 3%, 4%, 5%, and 6% on a student loan. And even that is that's kind of different as well, right? Because when the Fed is raising interest rates, it's sort of in the moment gauging the economy from a lot of different angles. But anyway, like I said, when they raise interest rates, it sends a message to Americans to curb the spending. Now, when they lower the interest rate, now that's where it incentivizes the need to go out and spend. Go out and maybe take out a loan, go out and take out a mortgage. Go out and buy some eggs, this, that. Well, not eggs, because that's different based on the market. But in general, when you're making a large debt transaction, but that temptation is present to borrow more money, take out a loan, take out a mortgage, and there's this sort of cyclical nature of you having to adjust your purchases based off of how the Fed makes actions. And that to me can be, in essence, a form of a debt loop. Now, a lot of people don't really pay attention to the Fed interest rates. They live in the present moment. I want a house now in this current location, and there is a house on the corner lot with a lot of square footage, 3-bed, 2-bath. Again, it's on a corner lot. There's a driveway, X, Y, and Z. It's perfect. It's in the neighborhood. And this is the price point. I'm looking at the price sticker. I'm not really looking at the interest rate. So a lot of people aren't sitting twiddling their thumbs every day, checking out when the Fed raises interest rates, how often they do it. But this sort of cyclical nature, right, whether you pay attention to them or not, you're still in essence taking out a form of debt, and depending on how much you would owe would obviously depend on the interest rate. And that can sort of be a form of a debt loop. And when you consider it, the U.S. government is trillions of dollars in debt. I've talked about this multiple times on my podcast, and I mean, they will probably never, ever get out of their own debt. They will never get out of their own debt loop. And so, again, I'm not suggesting to ignore the Fed completely. But what you should rather do is save enough money for the house down payment before you're trying to take out a loan for something substantial. And when you do need to take out a loan, clearly, because the house down payment is only going to cover, let's say you're buying a $300,000 house, and off the top of my head, 612, you need, what, 60 grand? Because is that 20%? So you need 60 grand, right? You may have that plus closing costs, but you're still going to need to take out a mortgage for the rest. And again, it depends on what the state of the interest rate is. At what point in time are you making that home purchase, or to taking that mortgage for that home purchase? And so we're shifting over to something else that you also have to think about. Like, as you get older, you have to realize, like, numbers matter more. Your physical age, your weight, your LDL levels, your blood sugar levels, your net worth, the interest rate on the mortgage that you still owe, the value of the car, the Kelley Blue Book value of the car that you currently own, your yearly salary, the kid's tuition, or the kid's age in terms of how far are they from college or the next part of school, depending on what type of school you have them in, the parents' nursing home fees, your parents' individual ages. And so these numbers do matter. And can you imagine yourself, if you're 30, 35, 40, 45 listening right now, can you imagine yourself being 60, 65 years of age, 70 years of age, and you're still trapped in a sort of debt loop, knowing that there's a lot of different factors. You may be responsible for not only your own health and safety, but you have a spouse, family, kids, other things, a small business. Can you still imagine yourself being trapped in a debt loop? You may think it's comfy now in your 20s and your 30s, but being 60, 70, or even 80 years old, feeling like you're still trapped, that's not a good place to be. I saw a post a couple weeks ago on the Discover subreddit as a Discover card. Pretty sure not owned by the Discover company, but y'all know how Reddit works. From the user throwaway923949292. And this person shared a screenshot of their paid off Discover card, a lump sum payment of $8,160.26. They then commented on that post, paid off $11K on Capital One and $2,500 off my Apple card, completely debt free now, and I don't think there's a better feeling. I had around $25K debt for 2 years. I congratulate you, throwaway 923949292. I do congratulate you because it's exceptional for me to hear success stories and what people share online and people who aren't afraid to share their stories about how they've paid off their debt, where they were at one point, and the things that they've done. I see that this is a success story of someone. I do not know if this person is a male or female, but this is a success story of someone who was in a debt loop for 2 years. And maybe needed that, not even in a loop, maybe under a pit or in the dirt or in a hole. Not in the dirt or not a pit. Let me say this. Yeah, let's say a pit, hole, whatever. And they got out. They clawed out, or they found a magic ladder and got out. Or if they were in the debt loop, the roller coaster, they just hopped off the ride. Or they manually cut the brakes and stopped the coaster, whatever. You just don't want to hop off a speeding ride. I don't know. I don't do roller coasters. I don't. And I applaud that person. But at the same time, and it's similar to, because I'm a big wrestling head, or even just think about anyone that wins a title, football team, boxing championship, women's tennis championship, a Breeders' Cup, Olympics. When you're at the top, it's hard because the only way you can go is go down unless you remain at the top. And so when you've paid off your debt, to this person, throwaway 923949292, will you suffer a loss of self-control? I hope that you don't. But will the loss of self-control draw you back, draw this person back in? And none of us can predict the future. I can't even predict my future. I don't know. I may end up falling back into a loop. But I would just say the best outcome is just to operate with a positive mindset day to day. Because remember, when you are broke, you're falling into that debt loop just to scrape by. When you go on vacation and you're short on cash, you fall into the debt loop with the credit cards. You're on vacation, shorty, and sweetheart, there's no way that boat party, that group tour, that shopping trip, you're not missing that. Just because you get paid next week? No, we putting this on the credit because I'm here now. That's what she says. She here now, right? She's outside. She's in here turning up. Man, he's out here popping the bottles and doing the thing. And just went to Japan, and he's out here, this excursion, right? He's got to put it on the card, get the travel points. The statement is coming up. No, we got to do that, right? Don't get paid until next week, but no, you got to do that now. To quote Smart Money Bro from YouTube, he said, quote unquote, being broke and on vacation does not match. Being broke and on vacation does not match. So I think I'm about to wrap this thing up and just wanted to let y'all know that debt is not sexy or cool. It is kind of crazy though. And remember, y'all, the only thing that can be a combination of crazy, sexy, cool, crazy, sexy, and cool, crazy, sexy, cool, can only be the music group TLC. I do think you should analyze your relationship with debt, where you stand, As humans, we are habitual beings. We will fall into certain patterns. But remaining in that infinite loop of debt, as I defined it in Wikipedia, from Wikipedia earlier in the podcast, will cause a burden on yourself, your family, and your future generations. So yet again, I open with some questions and I close with some questions. Will your own personal sequence of instructions keep you from living the best life possible? Or will that external intervention, hopping off the ride, pulling the plug, cause you to course correct your financial health? What will you do? What type of life do you want to live? I know the type of life I might want to live. I live across the street from a firehouse. Sometimes y'all might have heard the ambulances. They is running today. I hope people are all right, man. But they is running back and forth, and when you're recording, they'll be like, "Oh, come on, stop!" Just like there was a fire alarm at the last episode at the building over there, and it's like it was slowly picking up on the mic. I'm not trying to be reckless, y'all. Come on, man. But again. Will your own personal sequence of instructions keep you from living the best life possible? Or will that external intervention, you hopping off the ride, you pulling the plug, you pushing the brakes, pumping the brakes, cause you to course correct on your financial health? So that's all I got. Y'all get up out of this debt loop, y'all. Episode 53. Thank you for listening to the No Strings Podcast with me, Rel Simon. I appreciate y'all. Y'all take it easy until the next one. I don't know what the next one will be, but hey, I always hit y'all with the heat. And as always, it will be a good one, I hope. All right, y'all. Take care. Peace. Thank you for listening to the No Strings Podcast with Rel Simon.